Okay, I'll be brief here. I just want to also pay tribute to John. I worked with him for 25 years and knew him as a close friend as well as a colleague, and he would indeed be very happy with what we're trying to do here with his legacy. I come at this from a little bit of a different angle. I'm more of a user and a fan of the technology, and I may in fact have my own views on how some of this is happening. But I tell my students, I teach econometrics, and I tell the students, you know, so much of what we do in applied economics now is really driven by the computing power that we have. It's not that we didn't know how to do these things before, we just couldn't do them. And everybody's familiar with this famous Moore's law that's out there, but I pulled this up. You can't see the details there, but essentially we've gone from when I started my career just a few years ago from, you know, 5,000 or 10,000 transistors on a computing chip to 2 billion now, and it's growing. It's doubling every 2 years. That's Moore's law, essentially. And if you look at what's happening to data storage, you know, your computers, your cell phones and such, the amount to accumulate or the ability to accumulate and store data for processing is just unbelievable, and it's growing at an astounding rate. And I think this advances in computing are really driving the analytics. A lot of that's driving the data that we go to look for, which again leads us to refine our analytics. And every one of us in the room here carries around what 10 years ago would have been a supercomputer, right? And it's changed. It's not just changed agriculture. It's not just changed how the teenagers communicate and whatnot. It's changed every aspect of our lives, and I try to keep my students from using their cell phones in class, and it's impossible. They break out in a cold sweat and start shaking over that because it's just become that much a part of the way we live. I think that this innovation is inevitable, and I think that what's driving this, and it's a subtle point, but there's a significant economic value in this technology, and there's value to the farmer, there's value to the technology companies, there's value to the different users, but it's moving at such a fast pace. I think that this innovation is likely to, and we've seen this, and Bob mentioned this, in fact, it's going to outpace the legal framework that we deal with this, some of the ethical issues, and even some of the contractual issues that are out there. But I believe markets generally find a way to sort these things out. I'll talk about some examples here in just a little bit. But innovation is going to be ahead of this. We're going to be racing to catch up with our regulation and our contractual practices and so forth. And the fact that we have these concerns not going to stop innovation. We're going to have to address it. And as long as there's gains from both sides in these contractual agreements, there's going to be an incentive to adopt and move forward. And I was just pulled a few examples of which I found quite interesting. I didn't know some of these things, but everybody has their Facebook now, right? They hold 50 billion photos there, which I thought was amazing. eBay has 47.5 billion petabytes of data stored. I don't know what a petabyte is, but it's a lot of bytes, I know. The human genome used to take 10 years to sequence that. You can do it in a week now. The Hadron Collider, thought this was interesting for agriculture at least. If you think about collecting data, it has 150 million sensors and records 40 million data points per second. So the technology's out there. Of course, the NSA is in the news all the time, and I learned some things reading some of that I didn't put in here, and I won't mention, but they are collecting a lot of data from everyone, and they have a new data center that's going to hold 100,000 times the content of all printed materials in the Library of Congress. That's about to be finished, I understand. In agriculture, of course, you know, this is descriptive. We can look backwards and describe what happened. We can diagnose what we see. It can be diagnostic. Of course, it can be predictive. That's one of the generally one of the goals of statistical modeling is to predict and understand and diagnose what we've seen, but it can also be prescriptive, and that's what we see in agriculture, is it's suggesting better ways of doing things. As everyone's really mentioned, we see this in agronomic data, input usage, weather. There's a whole universe of possibilities coming up there. Logistics and how markets function point to point. I think that agriculture has a lot to gain there in understanding these market signals. Government clearly has a role, and of course I'm not talking about providing data, which certainly has been central and will continue to be, but there's issues here with protecting privacy, providing data for public use. There's positive externalities, and a society may gain from those, but if it's held by a private entity that has some market power as a result of having that data, those externalities might not be realized by society. So that's an issue. There's always a role for government in funding this research with these positive spillovers, but there's a lot of issues about potential misuse. And one of the examples, I think this is still being sorted out. It was, I believe, on a 60-minute show or something recently, but if you saw this, the high-frequency trading. If you have a fast enough computer, you can step in front of someone that places their order and take advantage of that. It's not illegal as far as I understand right now. It's a practice that everybody's concerned about, but the laws have not caught up with that quite yet. I think they're grappling with the issue now, but it's just one example of some of the sorts of things that we're going to have to start thinking about, which we may not have before.